Hello and welcome back to the Drinking Christian Show. I'm the Drinking Christian, Yankee Prepper, and our guest beer tonight is a Triple Belgian. It's brewed at the Unmapped Brewery in Minnetonka, Minnesota. It's just one of many, many fine beers that this company produces. You know, I began noticing the change in people maybe 8 years ago. It started to come up on my radar, but I wasn't really sure. I wasn't paying attention to it. I thought maybe I'm getting older, maybe I'm just, gaining more information, so other people just seem slower behind me, or they're not able to grasp it, or, they're getting kind of flighty in the way that they think. But probably 5 or 6 years ago, I came to the conclusion that something is really changing here. And I knew something was really wrong. That was about the time, I started searching it out. God designs us all. He designed me a certain way, and he gave me a very unique gift. It's a small gift, and I don't take any credit for it. I'll give all glory to him. But he gave me the gift of seeing the process of things. I love to study things. I love to look at the process of how something works, whether that's in a human or an animal or a machine. This makes me really good mechanically because I can look at a machine rather quickly, even if I've never touched it before or worked on it, and I can see the process from beginning to end, and that really helps me kind of diagnose problems. It comes very natural, very easy to me. I really believe it's a gift. And that's when I really started looking at the change in our culture as a process and what's going on here with the technology. I've attached a video by Nicholas Carr. You can study all you want on his works. He's got a lot of speaking events that he's been at trying to sound the alarm on this. And last name is spelled C-A-R-R, Nicholas Carr. And he talks about a lot of what I've presented to you in this series, only he gives kind of the science behind it. And I'm hoping this helps you understand what's happening as well, because I can see a lot of you out there are relating to me, and that gives me a lot of hope. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find you. I'm a trainer by nature, both in the military and on the civilian side. I've always trained people, men and women, not kids. And I began noticing even, I think probably one of the best examples, maybe, I don't know what it is now, 4 or 5 years ago, I was taking a group of guys to the Boundary Waters. And I'm very detailed in the information because information is what saves your life. It's important. I'm a deep thinker that way. I'm very detailed in what I put out. I would maybe send a half a page or a page of information out to the individuals that I'm going with on this Boundary Waters trip. And the older guys got it. They took it to heart. They looked at the email and read it and did what they needed to do. A lot of the younger guys, actually, I thought it was kind of either petty jealousy or something at the time, but they couldn't handle the longer information being given to them. It was kind of a shock to me because I've been paid to train people. I've been paid to take people and train them and show them this stuff. And they were like, it was almost like these guys were conditioned to read text messages. They got to have very shallow information very quickly in small bits in order to be able to take it in. And this was kind of a shock to me. Like, this is valuable information. This takes time, and it's worth something, and it may save your life. And the guys that didn't take the information to heart, of course, were either trouble on the trip, or they didn't understand what was going on, or they weren't ready. And at the time, they were the younger individuals. Now, zoom forward to today, and almost everybody is like this. Everything is very shallow. That's why I titled this video Bottlecappers, because the scary part about this, the process that I see being made and people being, I guess, the culture being formed into, is that we're making two castes of people, two levels of society. You've got the main mass of dumbed down people going from shallow piece of information to the other, not able to remember anything in the past. They're not interested in history. They're not interested in where they're going. They just have all these little bitty bits of worthless information that they're trying to keep going with, and they're exhausted. Everybody around us is exhausted. They've got all this information going in and out. They don't remember anything. People can't even have conversations by email anymore. I'm sure some of you can relate to this. They just keep sending you links to other stuff that they're looking at. That's all they can do now. They send you links to what they're thinking about, to hear somebody else talk. That's why there's so much parroting going on. You know, one thing gets started, whether it's true or not, and they just parrot it. I'm so tired of the parroting on the internet of things that just not necessarily aren't true. It's scary to me because I can see the end result of this. And again, the caste system where you have these great thinkers, you know, you got the Elon Musk, the Bill Gates, all these people that will control society. And then you have the mass of idiots that just go from one popular fad to the other with social media guiding them what they should be excited about. I often wondered, what are all these people on their phones just texting constantly? I mean, 4,000 texts in a month? What in the hell are you guys talking about? And it's all these little bits of information to get that next dopamine hit. And here's the real gist of it. The information, all these little bits of information, it may not even be good information. In fact, a lot of it isn't. It's nothing. It's shallow bits of nothing. Everything from Kim Kardashian to the Russians. I don't care what it is. It also explains a lot of what we see, even in the prepper genre and other genres on YouTube. But especially what I've noticed and observed in the prepping, all of these false alerts, all of these end of the world, all of this disinformation over and over again, yet the same people keep going back for more. And I've scratched my head and thought about it. How can this be? Why aren't they learning? But it's so shallow, and they're not remembering anyway. They're not keeping anything. And so they're just seeking out this information, even though it's not real. They just want it. They want it. Okay, now I'm up to date. Now I'm ready for the end of the world. This really makes sense when you look at this on the big screen, of things, and understand how this process is working people's minds and changing it. And it's scary, really, when you think about it, because there will be an end game result to all this, and I think it's on purpose. You're going to have these two levels, these two castes, the big thinkers that tell us what to think, and all of these morons, this zombie class that'll just be entertained with little bitty stupid bits of information that won't matter, while the rest of the world is basically being manipulated around them and even taken away from them. Anyway,
there have been
here you
studies
go. Nicholas
that
Carr.
show that whenever we find a new piece of information, or even when we go out and seek a new piece of information, a little bit of dopamine is released in our brain. And as you probably know, dopamine is a pleasure-producing chemical, neurotransmitter, very, very important to brain function, but also implicated in pretty much all kinds of addictions. What dopamine basically does is encourages you to do something over and over again by making it pleasing. We've created, essentially, this new environment in which we live more and more, a digital environment that we enter through our smartphones, that we enter through our computers, our tablets, that's all wrapped up with social media and the internet. We've created an environment of unlimited information. And then we've geared that environment to push information to us all the time through our phones and other devices, from Google or from Facebook or from Twitter or whatever. So we have this instinct, this very primitive instinct, to want to know everything that's going on around us. And then we've created an environment in which there's no end to new information that's out there. And what we begin to see very, very quickly is this, compulsive kind of behavior. There have been studies of how long people spend on looking at individual web pages when they're browsing the web or Googling stuff, looking for information. It's about 10 seconds. And that includes the time it takes for the page to load. And what's very interesting in that research is it doesn't matter how much information or even how good the information is on the web page. The researchers in one study, they added a lot of text or added a lot of images. The time people stayed on the individual page stayed at about 10 seconds. So clearly what you want to do is grab the gist of what's on the page, then find a link and click and go somewhere else so you can get some new information. If you look at studies of teenagers in their phones and texting, you find that the average teenager sends or receives about 3,300 texts a month these days. For teenage girls, it's actually over 4,000 texts a month. And that breaks down to one text about every 6 minutes throughout your entire waking life. And if you think adults show any more restraint around their gadgets, well, forget it, because the latest studies of how often an adult will pull out his or her smartphone and look at it during the course of the day, it's about 160 times, which works out to about once every 6 minutes during your waking life. And as we know from that email study, that's almost surely an understatement, because people consult their phones, consult the internet, consult social media all the time without even consciously realizing they're doing it. Well, this kind of behavior is very good for internet companies. If you're Google or Twitter or Facebook, you want people to constantly be checking their phone, constantly go online. You don't want people to stay put at any place for very long. And the reason for that is that these companies, and almost all internet companies, make more money the more quickly we jump from bit of information to bit of information. That's when they gather more information about us, and that's also when they gain new opportunities to show us the advertisements that ultimately fund their businesses. So this is very good for internet companies, but what about for ourselves and the way we think and the way we use our minds? You might say, well, we're just adapting to a new technology. We've had new technologies, new information technologies, new media technologies for hundreds of years now. Every time one comes along, we adapt our way of thinking to suit the technology. And so we're becoming, maybe it's good to be scatterbrained. Maybe it's good to be distracted all the time and interrupted all the time. And we're optimizing our mind to live in this new environment. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think we are very good at adapting. We have flexible, malleable minds. But we need to look at the downsides. Because even if we adapt, that doesn't mean that we end up better people or better thinkers after that process of adaptation. And if we look at what the internet and all this technology is actually doing to the way we think, the picture gets much, much darker. And it all has to do with how our brains transform information, mere information, into knowledge, giving us the ability to think deeply, to think rich thoughts, to think conceptually and critically. And the way this happens really has a lot to do with two forms of memory. On the one hand, you have what's called your working memory, and that's basically the contents of your conscious mind at any given moment. It's what you're thinking about. And what we know about working memory is it has a very, very tiny capacity. You can only fit about 2 to 4 elements of information in your conscious mind at any given moment. And then the other form of memory is what we refer to when we refer to memory, which is our long-term memory. And this has an enormous capacity. In fact, nobody's ever filled up their long-term memory. Nobody's ever said, that's it, can't remember anything anymore, it's full. So it's incredibly expansive, incredibly large. And the key to deep thinking is being able to take the information that's coming into your mind from what you're learning, the conversations you're having, what you're reading, this very, very small capacity of working memory, and transfer it to your long-term memory. And that's a process called memory consolidation. And it's only during memory consolidation that you connect that new piece of information to everything else you've learned and thought and experienced in your life. And it turns out knowledge isn't about these fragments of information that we can pick up all the time today. It's about the connections and associations that we make inside our own brains among all the pieces of information we gather. It's only when you make those connections that you get rich thinking, rich knowledge. Maybe, if you're lucky, you even end up with some wisdom. The problem is that there is a break. It's very easy to break this consolidation process. Because you have such a small capacity in your conscious mind, if you're overloaded with information, nothing stays there very, very long. Because in order to take in that new tweet or notification or Facebook update or Google result, you have to clear out something that's already in your conscious mind. And what we know about the consolidation process is it only happens when we're attentive, only happens when we concentrate for some period of time on new information. It's attention that triggers the transfer of information to our long-term memory and allows us to create all of these connections. And what we've created for ourselves with this rich, vibrant digital environment is a constant source of disruption, interruption, distraction. That means we're never keeping information long enough in our attention to form these rich connections. And this is more than just a theoretical concern. We see growing bodies of scientific evidence that show this happening. But to me, the most interesting, most revealing of these tests was one that examined how well people are able to distinguish important information from trivia. And what the scientists theorize, and I think this makes complete sense, is that the more time we spend jumping from bit of information to bit of information every couple of minutes during our day, the less we worry about how important something is, and the more we're simply attracted to whatever's new. So it's the new thing that grabs our attention. For instance, if it's a nice little cat video, you'll go to the cat video. You won't focus, even if you have something very important, very interesting in front of you. And so that's what we've created for ourselves, is this world in which, thanks to our technology, we're constantly subverting our ability to think our deepest, most profound thoughts. What we lose in optimizing our brain for shifting our attention is what she described as mindful knowledge acquisition, creative thinking, reflective thinking, critical thinking. Now, however much we might appreciate that we've optimized our brains to shift our focus very quickly, I think most of us would agree that those things, mindful knowledge acquisition, the ability to think critically and to think conceptually and deeply, those are really the fundamental aspects of the highest forms of human thinking. And essentially, by becoming slaves to our technology, we've cut ourselves off more and more from those highest forms of thinking. I'd even argue that as a society, we're starting to pretend that that doesn't matter. We place all our focus on the speed with which we can gather new information. And that's always been a very important part of being intelligent, to gather new information. But it's only the first stage of using your mind in the fullest way possible. The second and more important stage is actually to cut yourself off, to screen yourself from all that incoming information and consider deeply, think deeply about what you've discovered. And it's that second process, more important process, that is fading more and more away from us. And as I argue, as a society, we're kind of saying, oh, that doesn't matter. What matters is the speed of the consumption of information. So if there's the one overarching danger that I think we face as individuals and as a society in our dependency on on our smartphones and our computers and the web, it's that we're sacrificing our ability to determine for ourselves what our minds focus on, what we pay attention to. We're ceding that incredibly important function to the technology itself. And we know that Facebook and all these other companies are happy to take over that function for you, happy to determine what you look at. But it seems to me, if we sacrifice that fundamental quality of our mind, the ability to determine for ourselves what we're going to think about and how much time we're going to spend thinking about it, then for all the gains the internet has given us, we'll be sacrificing perhaps the most important thing that governs the depth of our thought. Thank you very much.